just being really mindful of what I need, what's going to keep me going, because a business with you at its core is going to need to be sustainable. So what do you need to sustain you?
What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now, let's get cozy and start today's episode. What do you need to sustain you? I invite you to sit with that question because in today's Lead with Love episode, we explore vulnerability, sustainability, and how building an anti-hustle business takes practice. We also talk about the value of prioritizing in-person connections to build your community, even if you have a full schedule. And in today's conversation, I get cozy with Nikki Groom, who is on a mission to help rising women leaders recognize their worthiness, own their power, and amplify their impact without checking their integrity at the door. Nikki is the author of A Power of Your Own: How to Ignite Your Potential, Uncover Your Purpose, and Blaze Your Own Trail in Life and Business. She's also a brand and marketing strategist, the creator of the Movement Makers Mastermind, and the host of the Movement Makers podcast, which I've had the honor of being on as a guest. And I'll link to it in the show notes at jadaselner.com/podcast. Nikki is also the founder of the 100 Stories Worth Telling project and acts as an advisor for social entrepreneurs and enterprises. Now, Nikki was also an early beta reader for She Builds because I'm in my 1 year plus celebration of She Builds being out in the wild. And one of my requirements for early readers was that they could not have worked with me through my coaching or my programs. And that was to really try to make the book be understandable for people who may not have the context of how I coach, how I work, how I serve. And so that was one of my requirements. So it was really fun because I've known Nikki for many, many years. We've been kind of operating in the same space for a while. So it was just a gift to be able to have her be one of the early readers. And the chapter that resonated with her the most was chapter 5, Reclaim Your Time and Energy, where I talk about time abundance versus time scarcity and how we get to make space for what matters most. So we'll definitely dig into that in this episode. And if you don't have a copy of She Builds yet, and you are looking for a cozy, strategic companion to guide you into the new year and carve out time and space to think, dream, and clarify your next level vision, you can grab your copy at shebuilds.com, your favorite bookstore, or your local library. I just want you to have a copy in your hands. And if you're not a physical, tangible book reader, I usually listen to my books. You can head over to shebuilds.com/audible. And if the book hasn't inspired you in any way, even if you've just read a few pages or chapters, I'm actually guilty of recommending so many books where I've only read the first chapter and I'm like, you have to read this book. It is amazing. You just need one tool or strategy to activate you. And I think that is worth the investment of a book, even if you don't go from beginning to end. So take that guilt off of you. But if this book has inspired you, please head over to shebuilds.com/review and just take 5 minutes to leave an honest review and help spread the love. And I'm ready for you to get to know our guest today. So now let's get cozy with Nikki. Nikki, I am so excited for us to have this conversation today. I know I got to be on your podcast recently, which I will definitely link to in the show notes. So I'm super excited to dive into that, the Movement Makers podcast.
Yes.
And I just wanted to kind of catch listeners up to how we first met. I know I first met you in person in Santa Barbara, California, on a beautiful beach. But if we could kind of just circle back to when we first connected.
Yes, gosh, it feels like so many years ago now. I've just always really resonated with you and with your work. And I actually can't recall how that first meeting came about, but I do remember that I was in your neck of the woods and I just thought that it would be silly to waste the opportunity to actually connect in person. I don't know about you, but virtual connections are wonderful, but sometimes just meeting somebody face to face really solidifies that connection you feel with them. And yes, you are just an incredible person doing really great work in the world. So it was my absolute pleasure to meet you on the beach, which is one of my favorite places to be.
Yes, yes. And I love that you said that about the kind of the virtual gatherings, which I think what is so beautiful about the online world. And I feel like we grew up in the online streets, we were like the original folks out there. But I feel that the depth and connection and collaboration comes from those in-person gatherings. I think you accelerate that connection and like, oh, these are my people. And I know for me, even when I was growing the Simple Green Smoothies Instagram account, a lot of the shout outs that I got were from people that I went to their boot camp event and was like flipping big tires and brought that person a green smoothie. And we took a picture and they gave me a shout out and that grew us to 3,000 followers. So I just think I just want to highlight how important meeting people in person, and especially us, like me being on your podcast and now you on mine, there's something about us meeting people, hugging in real life and having those in-person conversations is so important to our own vitality and health and happiness, but also to business development and growth too.
Yes, I could not have said it better. And actually, I love that you described us as like, what did you call it? We've been on these entrepreneurial streets for some time. Yeah. We grew up on these entrepreneurial streets. When I think back to when I first started my business, I remember I felt pretty isolated. I was starting my business online. I saw this huge opportunity and I live in the smallest state in the US. I live in Rhode Island and I thought, gosh, I don't think there's anybody else that's doing something similar. But then I made it my mission to seek out those people that were. And so in addition to growing my network online, which I think is really important as well, I began just meeting people for coffee dates and asking them about themselves and asking them about some of the challenges they were experiencing. And what was wonderful is that so often those challenges reflected either things that I was going through or things that I had been through. And I just began creating this wonderful community of people. I do feel very lucky because I used to say there's 2 degrees of separation between everyone in Rhode Island. And now I realize there's just 1 degree of separation. So it's very easy to network here. But yeah, that network and that community building has been absolutely indispensable to me. So I love that it's something that you talk about in She Builds as well.
Yeah. And I would love there's 2 questions that come up for me. One, having a full schedule, how do you make time? Because meeting people for coffee dates in person is different than hopping on a 30 to 60 minute Zoom chat. You have to get dressed. You got to get out of your yoga pants and like be a little bit more made up. So I'm just curious for you. And I know this was actually a piece in the book that really resonated with you around reclaiming your time and energy, but how have you made time to prioritize that with everything else that is on your plate as an entrepreneur?
I love that question. I'm laughing because yes, it is a daily not struggle, but something that I'm regularly thinking about. You talk about in the book, clarifying your capacity. And the truth is, I'm actually an introvert, which usually surprises people. They don't want to believe it about me. But when I'm with the right people, it energizes me and fills me up. And oftentimes it's those people where you can dive straight into the really deep convo, get into the real meaningful stuff. So I do have to be careful. I think back in the day, I was doing loads of those meetings, both virtual coffee dates, in-person coffee dates. And these days I don't have as much energy for that. I think especially in the wake of a pandemic and the chronic stress that so many of us experience as business owners, if we're not careful, I'm very, very intentional now about how many of those meetings I put on my calendar, because the last thing I want is to see you on my calendar and be thinking, oh gosh, I just really don't have the energy for this today, So these days it's fewer and further between, but I would say no more than one in-person connection a week, no more than that. And that's probably absolute max. So maybe it's more like 2 or 3 a month.
Yeah.
And then also with the phone calls, I'm really funny about how many phone calls I plug into my day. So I typically have the entire morning free for me to do my deep work, for me to focus on my most meaningful tasks. And then in the afternoons, like maybe I'll do a call at 1 and I'll do a call at 3 and I'll have some buffer room in between. Actually, funnily enough, we're speaking during one of my little windows here.
Yeah.
And that way I can really build up to them and have the energy that it takes to pour my best self into that conversation.
I love that. And I call myself a social introvert. So I'm very similar. And sometimes if someone invites me to something, I look at my whole calendar, not just the day that they're talking about. It's like how many other social interactions, show ups, and do I have on my calendar? Because if there's already other ones, it's like, oh, I'm going to see Michelle Obama with my friend Jen Kim this weekend.
So cool.
Meeting my aunt who's visiting from San Francisco. And so someone was inviting, and I was like, ooh, I just have I have enough social connections for the week for my introverted soul. So looking at it from that perspective, I think is really helpful. I also love that you said earlier on, as you were building your network, your community, your business, having more of those up front. I think that's an important distinction of like when you are in startup and you don't have a wealth of relationships and connections versus once you're more seasoned, you've been at it for years, you have a beautiful web of relationships with people that you can create some more intentionality of what you say yes and no to. So I think that's a really powerful distinction, because if you don't have the friends yet and you are in that tiny town or that tiny state, really saying yes to more of those opportunities earlier on, and then learning more about yourself of like, oh, this type of conversation drained my energy and this one energized me.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the way you describe that is beautiful, because it definitely can be a wealth of conversations. And like you said, being very intentional about actually, if I just had this conversation this month, like, what do I think that would come of that? I always go into these types of conversations with like a high intention, low attachment mindset.
Yes.
So I'm always open to the opportunities that might unfold. But I have had single conversations with people or lunch dates that have led to like my best months ever and like the most incredible long-term client relationships, referral partnerships. So sometimes it can just be one conversation. So if you can be very intentional about not necessarily speaking to all the people, but that person seems like someone I really need to get to know, that can be super helpful.
Yeah. And I think that's the invitation of when you need to stretch yourself and get out of your comfy PJs and out of your comfort zone and actually you rally, like, okay, there's a reason I think I'm supposed to be in this room or at this event or connect with this specific person. Also listening to your intuition, because sometimes, especially as introverts, it's like there is a little bit of a rally that has to happen to like get in the room. So I love that. Can you share a specific moment, story of where one of these meetings, gatherings with someone in person, not knowing where it would lead, how it led to actually a really big win for you and your business?
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of somebody that I met. Actually, he was kind of like the MC / host / just incredible person in charge of this retreat that I went to a few years in a row. It was hosted by Jonathan Fields, who I know you've had on your podcast. And it was KC, the guy that really was bringing so much energy to the event. And what I loved about this guy is that not only was he super energetic during the day, but that he would be the same person leading the morning meditation. And for the first time in my life, the first time I went to one of the events, I was like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to start the morning with meditation and then go from there. And so KC was the person that introduced me to my meditation habit. Incidentally, it was around the 5-year mark in my business where I was feeling really burnt out. I was feeling like I was saying yes to all the things. I was feeling a little lost and directionless. And right after the retreat, I did a 30-day meditation challenge with KC that really encouraged me to slow down. I truly learned the meaning of slowing down to speed up and becoming way more intentional about what it was that I wanted, who I wanted to be working with. And as a result of that, very soon after, I had a couple of different meetings, conversations, and actually it was KC who threw out in the Facebook group, hey, I know this person who's looking for somebody to help them launch their book. I ended up speaking to that individual. Her name is Jennifer Brown. She's a phenomenal DEI consultant and keynote speaker. We launched her book to #1 on Amazon in like 6 weeks or something insane. And I went on to work with her for the next 5 years, doing really meaningful work with an incredible team. So that was like something that I didn't see coming, but just by staying open to making those deeper connections, challenging myself, pushing myself out of my comfort zone, led to this unforeseen opportunity that really, truly changed my life and my perspective.
I love that. And I love that it wasn't just one specific moment, right? You were going to the retreat for, a couple of years. It's like following Jonathan Fields and then KC, Christopher Carter, who I actually mentioned in the book in She Builds. He's the author of Permission to Glow. And yeah, he has so much unicorn energy. It's just so amazing. But it wasn't just that of like the mindfulness and slowing down, but then you were introduced to this person that then you would build a relationship with and support with their book and their business. So I think that is so, so beautiful that it's multiple dots that are being connected along the way. That wasn't the intention for you going to do the meditation in the morning and then show up throughout the rest of the retreat. So I love that so much. So I wanted to connect with you. You were actually one of the early beta readers who read She Builds, the anti-hustle guide to grow your business and nourish your life. And it was such a vulnerable process for me to share with people the messy draft. It was just very messy. There was a lot of cuts and edits and things that had to be made. So I was just curious, like what your experience was like, because I know you have also written your own book, which you have is A Power of Your Own, How to Ignite Your Potential, Uncover Your Purpose, and Blaze Your Own Trail in Life and Business. So I know you know what it takes to kind of get a book out into the world, but just curious, what was your experience like being an early reader and now having the physical book in your hands? I'm just curious for you to share kind of your process on your side. I'm on the side of the writer of like, oh my goodness, everyone's seeing my early draft and all of those pieces.
Yes, well, I definitely identify with that vulnerability, as you had said. I just really admire the way that you do everything, honestly, Jada, and even the way that you were inviting people into that inner circle and saying, hey, would you read this? I just so admired your courage in doing that, because again, I know what that takes. And, one of the things that I had said to you before we began this conversation is that most business books bore me to tears. And what I loved about your book then and what I love about it now is how you just kind of weave stories, and in particular, your own journey throughout the book. And, I read the book, and actually my only experience of the book for the longest time until I had a copy in my hands was just reading it online. And what I love now is I'm actually holding it in my hand as I'm saying this. It's such a beautiful, I've got the hardback book. It's a gorgeous cover. It's just so beautifully presented. I'm a weirdo. I smell book pages. I smell your book pages. It's so good to see it come together. And I know that we can be our own worst critics. I remember feeling very vulnerable, putting my book out there, getting people to read it in the very beginning stages. And then I think as well, because we want to make sure that we get the message across. I don't know if you found this as well, but every time you read the book, it's like, oh, I could tweak that. I could change it. And at some point you have to let go of perfectionism and just put it out there. And it is scary. So, I mean, my hat is off to you. I think the whole way that you navigated the process of inviting people in, of having them be a part of that journey it just felt really special. And so, yeah, and I'm just absolutely thrilled for you that this book is now out there in the world, that people can hold it in their hands too, and that the messages are just so beautifully distilled down and resonated with me so much. So I'm just grateful that you wrote the book in the first place.
Oh, thank you so much. And one question that I have for you, knowing that there are stories and pieces in there, was there one that was most memorable to you, that stood out to you, that you're kind of like, it's still ringing in your ears, or just curious, either a story or a lesson or an idea that stayed with you?
Yeah, I've been following you and have been immersed in your work and admiring everything that you've been up to for so many years. And I had no idea about your daycare story. So I didn't know, like in my mind, you had sort of had this overnight success with Simple Green smoothies, which, by the way, I know it wasn't overnight, but it was fast, right? It kind of seemed like that, because that's probably when I first came across you. And then finding out that actually, no, years before that, I love how you open the book with that, your husband is on the bonnet of the car and he's like, come on, we can figure this out. And then reading how you were like living in the daycare center at one point, I had no idea about that story. And I felt so grateful just to read it and know that, it's very easy to look at you now, Jada, and be like, wow, you've achieved so much, you're so successful. Of course, you can talk about being anti-hustle, but you had to learn what it meant to be anti-hustle way back then, when you literally said to yourself, burnout is not an option. I'm not going there. I've got to find a different way. And so, growing an anti-hustle business, it's not always easy. And it's something that we have to keep coming back to and we have to keep practicing. And I think it was so generous of you to share that story and some of your other stories with us, because it just gives a little bit of perspective and helps people realize, like, it doesn't matter where you are right now. There are ways to take what's in this book and begin applying it to your own life and really stop sacrificing yourself wherever possible in favor of other people's priorities. I always kind of look at it in terms of a scale. And so often, especially when we're in service to other people, we kind of let that scale tip away from us, which is when we burn out. So we let it tip in favor of other people, instead of remembering that we need to be a part of that equation at all times. And so, yeah, that was a story that hit home for me, because I was like, wow, I had no idea. So I think that was really cool that you shared that.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting because, it's like, oh, well, I've talked about, Little Sprouts Playhouse in my World Domination Summit keynote, but not to that extent, so that's what's really powerful about writing a book, is you have an extended runway to go a little bit deeper into stories versus a 30-minute, 60-minute keynote, right? You're trying to share lessons and stories throughout your journey. And obviously, as we get older, we have more stories and more things. And that was actually a really big challenge of mine. I couldn't possibly even fit all the things in there that I wanted to, but I felt that story was very instrumental for me and my husband and my daughter kind of navigating. That was the first entrepreneurial venture that we had, and it was a brick and mortar. So that's one thing that I love, having a diverse clientele with who I coach, because I've been in so many different businesses over the years, and I just get what it takes, whether it's brick and mortar or e-commerce or digital, online, health and wellness. There's just so many things. So I love that story resonated. And I didn't even think of, like, there's probably so many things that even my closest friends didn't know about or know this specific story, or how hard it was during that time, because we're kind of always just catching people up almost to like, oh, this is what happened in the last 3 to 5 years,
Yeah, definitely. And to open the book with such a vulnerable story about, it's kind of funny now, I'm sure, right? Looking back, but like, that was an awful argument. And it was at a point where you were really struggling. And so to open the book on that note, you know that you're about to read some really good stuff because you're not holding anything back. So I love that.
Thank you. So for you, I know that you were really resonated with the reclaiming your time and energy, that in chapter 5, reclaim your time and energy. And we kind of talked about that, even how you connect with people, whether in person or online, as you're building and nurturing your community and your network. Did you implement any of those strategies in your own business from that chapter, or anything from any part of the book?
Yeah, gosh. So having been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years, my business has gone through so many different iterations. And I know you get that. And so when you ask the question, how am I using my time and does that approach support my priorities? I feel like I need that reminder every day.
Yes.
It's not like I don't think I ever quite get to the point where I'm like, I've mastered that. It's something I have to keep coming back to. So when I think about, for example, tracking my time, this year I've been working very intensively with a few clients, helping them to manage their marketing mix and things like that. And I felt like I had a good handle on how much of my time I was spending on different clients. And when I finally really forced myself and my assistant to track every single hour, I realized that for one client in particular, I was working almost double what I was charging for. And I share that because I've been doing this for a long time. I should know better. And I really needed to have a better handle on that because I was feeling very stressed, very much like I had no real time, no spaciousness around my workday to take a breath. And so becoming more aware of that was really foundational for me. And actually, I did that before I read the final version of your book. But I love that you talk about that in there because it's so important. And again, it's something that you can do once and 3 months later, it's different. So you kind of have to do it again and you have to revisit it. So that was huge for me. And then even just the way that you talk about clarifying your capacity so you can do more of the work that matters and that lights you up. Like oftentimes my capacity isn't anywhere near what I would like it to be. And oftentimes I'm operating in that sort of optimal state. Like I'm going to say yes to all the things, do all the things. It's going to be fine. And that is always a recipe for disaster. So just being very, even we were talking earlier about those one-on-one connections, actually how much capacity, how much energy do I have for those connections, for those meetings? Am I being realistic about what it's going to take? Not just in terms of the time, because, you can have a great conversation in 30 minutes with somebody, but about that energy element and just being very, very self-aware about when am I at my most energetic? When do I just love to be alone with no one speaking to me or interrupting my flow time? So really the lessons that you teach in that chapter are things that I keep coming back to because my tendencies, and I don't know if this is ingrained in me from, years of working different jobs, 10 years in the corporate workspace on either side of the Atlantic, but it's almost like this default way that I learned how to be when working that I have to keep coming back to and unpicking the knots so that I really am creating a life that gives me the freedom and financial stability that I'm searching for. And I think it can be really, really easy in pursuit of the financial stability piece to neglect the fact that we actually deserve to take ownership of our time, work in a way that makes sense for us as much as it does for our clients. So I speak about it more in the present tense because it is a constant struggle and something I have to keep coming back to. And I think that for so many of my clients, it's a struggle as well, because they really do have incredible experiences and expertise and strengths that they want to use in service of others. And it can be so easy to do that to the extent that we lose ourselves. So I'm actually completely transparently in the midst of a big transition in my business. It feels like a big transition for me, at least, in terms of really overhauling the ways that I'm working. I'm planning a relaunch of my business. And so much of that is about really clarifying my capacity, noticing how much time I have each week. Like, I don't want to be working 40 hours a week for clients. I want to have time to unwind, to read a book, to, chill, to do a meditation, whatever it is. A friend of mine talks about even breaking better. So actually stopping for lunch, pausing for a walk, or to speak with a great friend. I think all of these things need to inform my vision for what's next. And I think that they can be things we so easily forget. And this is what you talk about, right? This is exactly the way that we've been taught we have to do things. And so I have to keep coming back to those lessons and being like, actually, no, there's a different way. And I love that you wrote the book that says, yeah, there is a different way. And here's what it can look like for you. So yeah, it's been a ride. And, I always talk about being in business for yourself as an evolution. And so just as your business evolves, you are evolving at the center of it. So the more that I'm learning about setting better boundaries, being better with my time, and really owning what I'm capable of and coming to my client partnerships from that place and not from a place of feeling like they're somehow better than me. Casey, actually, he spoke to me once and said how I'd been looking at a particular client of mine as if they were the sunshine. He has a wonderful way with words, doesn't he, Casey? And He was like, actually, you are both suns, in this universe. And so, yeah, it's a constant practice.
Yeah, I love that you said that it's a constant practice and that we have to revisit and self-awareness, because oftentimes some of the pieces inside She Builds, which are foundational business practices, being able to create your future vision and really like, how do you want to feel? What do you want to experience? All of those pieces. It's not like we haven't done this before. And it's not like we haven't tracked our time before, any of that, or thinking of like, but we actually have to be in a practice of revisiting and reassessing, does this still work? Because we are growing and evolving. I always say I'm an artist first and a business owner second. Like, I am a creative. I have a performing background. I did theater, spoken word poetry. So I really thrive in creative evolution and expression. And I noticed for myself that I have these 3-year creative cycles of reinvention, whether it's, starting a whole new business or starting a new product or offering inside the same business. And I think that's what happens in hustle culture, a male-dominated narrative of what it means to build a business, because we're looking at these unicorn companies and you just stick with this same company and you grind and you sell it for $1 billion, $1 trillion and all these things. And it's like, but I think many women, non-binary folks, like, we build differently. And we're building a business that is fluid and flexible and ever changing just the way that we are. But we feel this sense of shame or guilt or embarrassment, or we're lazy or we're fickle because we can't stick with the same business model or the same offering for, a 10-year plus cycle. And there's nothing wrong with someone who wants to go deep and all the way in and really grow and scale a specific type of company. But that doesn't have to be everybody.
Yes. And I love that you have 3-year cycles of reinvention, because mine is 5. And I don't know why, but it's literally every 5 years. And so I am literally at the 5-year mark right now. And I'm asking that question, does this still work? I love that you posed that question. I think that we have to keep coming back to that if we're going to continue, because so often things don't work for us anymore. Especially, I think, like, I'm not old, but I'm getting older.
Yeah.
And the same stuff, like when I think about when I started my business, I was, early 30s, and I would regularly work into the early hours of the night trying to get things done. I look back, I have no idea how I did that. I cannot focus after about 4 p.m., 5 p.m. every day. Like, I'm kind of done after that point. And so just being really mindful of what I need, what's going to keep me going, because a business with you at its core is going to need to be sustainable. So what do you need to sustain you, right?
Yeah. And one question I'd love to ask of you as we start to kind of wrap up is, how do you put love into practice into your business? What does leading with love mean to you, especially in this season of your 5-year cycle and reinvention?
I love this question. And I am just going to answer it off the cuff for where I am right now, because I may have answered this differently a few months ago, but right now, right where I am, thinking about conversations around burnout and what it means to really grow our businesses the anti-hustle way, in a way that not only nourishes our lives, but nourishes us. I feel like leading with love right now means leading with love for myself, and leading with love for what I need, and leading with love for, in terms of just being a little more tender with myself and acknowledging that things do not have to happen overnight, however much we might wish that they would, and just giving myself grace en route to really creating a business that works for me right now.
Yes, I love that. And I think that is such a practice for us as ambitious women, that we tend to people please, we take on more responsibility,
yes.
we give, we're generous, and it's learning how to receive. That has been my practice and journey of growth too, of how to receive love, even how to receive pleasure, how to do those things like, oh, what if I just didn't even think of, I'm already a caring, kind human being. What if I just thought about myself? And that could be just as fulfilling for someone else to see me in my joy, to see me receiving love and care and pleasure and all of those pieces. So I love that you are putting yourself at the center of what leading with love means to you. And I'm curious, and I know you're kind of in the season of brewing, but is there a dream, a desire, a secret wish that's kind of brewing that you're open to sharing right now as you kind of step into this next season? And you might not have an answer right now, and that's okay. But my curiosity is like, what should people be tuning into you as they follow learn more about you and your work and evolution?
Well, I'm a Scorpio, so we like to be mysterious, but I will say that I am so passionate about helping to amplify the voices of women leading change. And that's really where I see myself using my strengths in service of others, be they speakers, consultants, coaches, authors, even women running for office, but basically any woman who, non-binary folks as well, who want to level the playing field, use their perspectives to light the way forward. I want to help them build narrative power so that they can really create that meaningful change. So that's where I'm headed. And it really excites me a lot. So yeah, I guess watch this space. And yeah, there's no time frame because, as you said, I'm brewing, but
yeah, where could people follow? I on the Fascinate? Sally Hogg's.
Yeah.
Intrigue, mystique. I'm all that. That. So I love that. But where could people follow along your journey online?
Yeah, I make it super easy for people. So I'm at nikkigroom.com currently. There may be a new website in the future, but I'll announce it to my email list first. And then everywhere on social media, I can be found at Nikki Groom. I'm most proactive right now on Instagram and Facebook. So come find me, come say hi, let me know that you listened into this conversation. And yeah, any friend of Jada's is a friend of mine. So
I love that. And one last question is, how would you describe She Builds to a friend?
Great question. I would say this is the business book that you need if you're really serious about creating a business that will last the distance, and that will be in service to your life as much as it is to other people's lives.
I love that. Thank you, Nikki, for joining me in this cozy conversation. And I know we'll stay in touch.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention and listening to Lead with Love. You can always get the links and resources mentioned in each episode over at leadwithlovepodcast.com so that you can build a sustainable business and live a creative life on your terms. If this message, Leading with Love, resonates with you and you want to take a stand for remembering that there are humans with beating hearts behind the numbers, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people spread more love in the world, which we really, really need. I also love hearing from you. So as you're listening, take a screenshot, share your favorite takeaway, and tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Jada Selner. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.